Hello, and welcome to the Divorced Dadvocate, divorce support for dads, where we help dads create a healthy and less traumatic divorce. My name is Jude Sandoval, and I'm your host. I created this podcast and the Divorced Advocate community as a result of my own high conflict divorce, and because you as a dad deserve all the resources necessary to thrive through this challenging time. I encourage you to check out our website at thedivorcedadvocate.com, where there are resources that correspond to this episode, as well as free access to our membership community, where you will find live meetings, free workshops and courses, private discussion groups, and more. And now, on to this week's episode. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode. I'm so pleased that you are here and you're in store for a phenomenal episode. We have an expert in family law today, and I'm excited to be able to tap her expertise. For some reason, it's a challenge getting family law attorneys to come on and talk a little bit. So I just also want to preface that we're not giving any legal advice today. We're going to be talking about a lot of legal matters, but none of this is advice. And we're just going to be kind of giving you a lay of the land around family law and the courts and kind of things to think about and prepare for. So my guest today is the managing partner at Lisa Zeiderman, LLP, a matrimony attorney, CFL, and certified divorce financial analyst, where she regularly handles complex financial and custody divorce matters for high net worth individuals. She's been named to Crain's New York list of notable women attorneys for 2022, a Hudson Valley Best Lawyer in 2022, a 2021 Best Family Law Attorney for Client Satisfaction by the American Institute of Family Law Attorneys, among other awards. She's also a founding member of the American Academy of Certified Financial Litigators and a member of the Panel for Attorneys for Children. In addition to authoring a well-read blog on Psychology Today called Legal Matters, Understanding Mental Health Issues as They Apply to Divorce and Child Custody, she is regularly published in Financial Advisor magazine, the New York Law Journal, and various other publications, and quoted on issues ranging from financial empowerment to tax issues to child custody. She's also a Fordham University of Law graduate and serves as the vice president of the board of Savvy Ladies, Inc. and on the board of Lift Legal Information for Families Today. Please welcome Lisa Zeiderman. Hi, Lisa.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to have you. Your resume is absolutely phenomenal. I sincerely appreciate you. I was not kidding when I said for some reason attorneys are just hesitant to come on and talk about things. I understand the legal system and how everybody kind of sometimes will sue everybody for saying something, but that's kind of why we give that disclaimer. So I applaud and I appreciate your being out there and talking with us today. And I also want to let the folks that are listening to non-member podcasts know that they'll be able to listen to this entire episode by going to the website and joining the membership, because we're going to be talking about a lot of good stuff today. So on that note, just share with me briefly to start why. Okay, so my background is I've been divorced for almost 10 years now. And so that means for a decade, I've been in and out of family law court, and it is challenging. Why in the world did you decide to get involved in family law, and tell us a little bit about your background?
So I was actually in the fashion business for many years, and then I went through my own divorce, and I realized that I could really be helpful to people going through the process. And I think that there are various family law attorneys who have gone through divorce, and they have, I think, a better understanding of what people are facing and what people feel as they go through the entire divorce or custody process, because they've been on the essentially on those front lines. And when I explain to a client how they're going to be sitting in a deposition or they're getting ready for their trial, I've done all of these things. So, and I did them before I was a lawyer. So I understand the stress and the emotion that is part of the process. And I thought that I could actually be helpful to people. So that's why I did it.
That's amazing, because I know that for me, going through it, that was one of the hardest things, is not not knowing, and at the time not having an attorney that really explained, well, this is what's going to happen, and this is okay, or this is not okay, and just breathe because it's going to be okay. And yeah, to have somebody with that background and knowledge to have gone through it themselves is pretty huge. So on that note, because you have been through it and you see this every day, what are like 5 of the biggest mistakes you see people making before they go forward with filing for divorce or asking for a divorce?
So I would say one of the first mistakes is that they sometimes are watching things happen right before their eyes that may not be in their children's best interest, and they're not doing anything. And that is problematic. So if you're in a situation where your children are being mistreated, or there is a lot of emotional distress going on in the household, you need to actually step in and do something about that. And so maybe you need to step up the divorce process or get a therapist involved, because sometimes people come to me and they have tapes and they have recordings and they're watching all this stuff go on. And I'm like, why didn't you do something? This isn't a movie of your family. This is actually your family. So that would be one thing that I would say. The other thing that I would say is be aware of your financial issues, be aware of your finances. There's a lot of times when people delegate those issues to someone else in the household, meaning their partner, and they're not as aware of it. It happens to stay-at-home dads. It happens to stay-at-home moms quite frequently. It is part of being in a financial partnership is to be aware of what's happening. Third is that I think sometimes bad-mouthing the other parent in preparation for the divorce before you actually go through the divorce, don't do that. Don't do it to providers. Don't do it to your friends. Remember, your children are a part of both of you. And so I think that's really important that you are fostering a relationship with the other parent at all times and understanding that the other parent is important to both of you. I would say also gathering financial information. Don't start shredding things. People come to me and they say, oh, I wish I would have had that. Don't shred your financial documents. And most of all, people sometimes neglect to keep their separate property tracing documents. So in New York, for example, it is your burden to trace your separate property and to understand where your separate property is located now. Sometimes people don't do that. They inherited property and now they mix it with joint property or marital property. Don't do that, because otherwise, if your separate property is not kept separate and apart, or worse yet, it's spent, you will not get credit for that separate property. So you got an inheritance and you spent it down, it's gone. Nothing we can do about it now. Or you got an inheritance and then you earned some money and you put them both in the account, and then you took out some money and now you've commingled the whole thing. And we are, 10 years later, and now you're coming to us for your divorce and you're saying, I came into the marriage with this amount of money and I want it back. There's nothing I could do about it because now you've either spent it, mixed it, commingled it, etc. So make sure you keep your separate properties separate. And I will say from the onset, it's always good to have a prenup.
Is that number 5?
That would be number 6, I think.
6, okay.
But it should have been number 1.
Always good to have a prenup, right? Okay. So in the context of dads and divorce or divorcing dads, it seems like all 5 of those steps pretty much say, pay attention to what's going on. Don't hide from any issues that are going on. Know what is happening with your financial life, with your children's life, with life in general. And that doesn't mean that, if you're in potentially a traditional family role that you're ignoring everything that's going on, or that you have to be intimately involved, I should say, with everything that's going on all the time. But if things are not going well and you think that this is something that you're contemplating, you're going down this road, you really you probably should be aware anyway, right? Okay. It shouldn't be that you start to do this stuff only when you're paying attention to to maybe getting a divorce. You should probably be paying attention to what's happening with your children and your finances, or what you're saying about your kids or your spouse or whatnot. But maybe this is the wake-up call for you. So make it be your wake-up call. So if that is in fact true, then from the perspective of like what's going to happen legally, why is that mindset important? And if you don't keep that mindset, what are some of the drawbacks that are going to happen throughout this process?
So, look, we represent dads and moms. Mm-hmm. And I would say my practice is probably about half and half, really. And dads want to be just as involved much of the time, not all of the time, as moms. And moms want to be just as involved most of the time, but not all of the time with the children. But you can't be hands off and then and just say, I'm giving all of that responsibility to my wife, and then come around at the time of divorce and think that's not going to have an effect.
Right.
And it's important that you recognize that although you might be the primary wage earner, or you might be the stay-at-home dad, okay, then no matter what, you need to be involved in understanding what's going on in your kids' lives. You need to be involved with going to the doctor, dealing with the therapist, participating in the parent-teacher conferences, helping your children with their homework, doing those things. That doesn't mean that you have to be involved in every single thing, as you point out, okay? Right. Or that you are doing it to the detriment of your other parent, right? So that they don't have time with your children. But you do need to actually be part of all of those pieces, because otherwise, when you get to the divorce portion, there may be somebody who is much more involved and much more well-positioned to have decision-making in those areas, or to have primary custody because, they've been around more. Again, it's not an expectation that you're going to be home 24/7. It's not an expectation that you should quit your job. It's not an expectation that you're going to change it all up. It's an expectation that you are involved and a part of your children's lives.
Right. And so in the eyes of the court, why is that important? Because I'll tell you, I get a lot of dads that come to me that go, oh, they love their kids. They just love in the time. However, they've been the primary wage earner and they haven't been to parent teacher conferences. They don't know all their kids' friends' names. They don't, like, all of this stuff is not something that, and I say, well, you need to start, right? Like you got to figure that stuff out. But their next question is, well, why?
Well, because so the why is the really big question, right? So perhaps that person is okay with not having primary custody. Perhaps that person is okay with something less than a 50-50 schedule, or not making those final decisions on those areas because they've delegated it out and they prefer, frankly, to be working on their career, or they're perfectly satisfied with the fact that their spouse has made those decisions and they trust their spouse to continue making those decisions, or they like the fact that they can travel for business or work late, and that's fine, right? That's okay. And so their schedule may be different. Doesn't mean that they're not going to have a great relationship with their kids.
Right.
And it just means that it when they get to a situation where they're in the middle of a divorce, it may mean that they're not going to get 50% of the time, or they may not make that final decision. Everybody doesn't necessarily want to do those things.
Sure.
So, but if those are things that are important to you, then they should have been important to you before the divorce started, right? And just delegating it out isn't really okay. Now, you also may be in a situation where both of you are working full time and you both have careers, and there are people who are doing some of these things, right? You're outsourcing some of this stuff. You might have a nanny, you might have somebody a parent who is coming in, and a grandparent, meaning who's coming in and helping. Those are all okay too. Everybody has a different narrative of how they are dealing with their lives, but it makes it more difficult if all of a sudden you want to change it all up because we're now going through a divorce.
Right. So is it fair to summarize that in that the court is really going to want to try to keep things as much as stable as possible throughout this transition for the children. And if that means that you weren't involved and that you didn't have as much time with them, and now you're going to be divorced, that they're going to be looking at and saying, well, this is just, the point you made is great. This obviously wasn't important to you before. Why is it now important to you? And it doesn't seem like that's going to be in the best interest of the kids. So I think we're going to keep it kind of status quo, how it has been. And we're going to go with that route because that is going to have less impact on the children.
So I wouldn't say it's going to be necessarily status quo if you can make adjustments to your life, right?
Okay.
But I also don't necessarily know that it's going to leap in the other direction totally, right? There's that moderation concept where there's going to be changes because maybe it was fine to delegate it to your spouse because that's how you just kind of work things out, right? But now you're going to be living in two separate houses or two separate apartments. And so there is going to, no matter what, there's going to be some changes. And you may very well have much more time with your children than you had before. And that's fine because there needs to be two parents in the children's lives. But it may not be as dramatically changed as you would like. And if that wasn't a priority before. And so I'm going to say that, this idea that children are just split in half, right? And we just divide them in half and 50% to you and 50% to you, that may not end up being the situation. Or it may be that your spouse is not able to get past the fact that you should have time. And this is an important thing, that you should have quality, meaningful time. And then it could be that, frankly, you do end up not only with 50%, but you could end up with primary custody. Because keep in mind, one of the main features that somebody, in court, a judge will look at is which parent is in the better position to foster a relationship with the other parent. And if your spouse is basically interfering, not allowing, blocking, not encouraging the children to be with you, then that may be a whole different ballgame. And you may be the parent who ends up at the end with custody of your children, primary custody, not even 50-50. So it depends on the facts and the circumstances. But I think you can't go wrong by being somewhat involved with your children as they're growing up.
Right. So, well, obviously, and hopefully, and I know that the dads listening to this and the ones that are involved in our community are the ones that are, and they wouldn't be listening if they weren't concerned or worried or want to do things right or figuring out after the fact how to get through it. But so those that are listening that are saying, okay, well, maybe I haven't been like that. What are some of the best steps that they can start to do immediately that's going to give them the best opportunity to, have a Lisa or whomever they have then that's representing them to go to court and say, look, this may have been how it was, but this is what's happening now. This is the situation now. And this is why it's important for the dad to be able to be in the life or have more parenting time.
So I think it's just that become more involved, right?
Okay.
Make sure that you're going to your kids' games. Maybe you want to coach something. Maybe you can go to the doctor's appointments. Make sure that you're meeting with the parent, that you're meeting with the teacher. If you can't be at the teacher's meeting, maybe do a Zoom. If you've got a meeting and you can't do it, maybe organize your time at work a little differently so that maybe some nights you're working late and some nights you're not, and you're home and you're able to take dinner. Maybe those nights that you're working late, you work later, so that other nights you can come home earlier. Utilize your weekend time, maybe give up some golf. Okay. Yeah. And instead of playing golf, if that's your thing, okay, or going out with, friends, et cetera, that instead, being with your kids becomes your priority. There's a lot of ways to change it up without changing up your work life necessarily, right? I think that's the key. I think those parents who say, okay, I'm going to quit my job and I'm now going to stay home and I'm going to, and that's going to make the difference. That doesn't make the difference because everybody still needs to be supported. And now we're going to have two households that need to be supported. Right. So it's even a greater stressor in terms of the finances, but there are ways to adjust things. And there are ways to start. Maybe you come home one day and you spend some time with your kid and you do the homework. Maybe you work on a project during the weekend instead of, sleeping later. It's not easy to do these things, but they may be meaningful to your children and to your relationship with your children. Make sure that when you're taking your vacation, that you take your kids on your vacation, right? So that you have time, because vacation time, frankly, is great, meaningful, quality time with your children.
Right. Well, and you hit it on the head with making adjustments like at work. The long and short of it is this is going to be a major change, and you're going to have major changes whether you want it or not. So if you are the one filing, then you probably thought through some of these changes. But oftentimes, and again, a lot of listeners and women are the ones that file more often than men. So oftentimes they're like, oh, this is a change that's forced upon me. So there's a lot of resistance around that. But what I say to them is, you're going to have a change anyway. So you might start thinking about that work change now. So if, like you said, if you need to adjust your hours, or you need to figure out, or if you need to think about a career change, you're going to start thinking about it now and start making those changes immediately. Don't wait until after.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey, this is Jude with a quick reminder about the Divorced Advocate Foundation for Fathers, which is our nonprofit that helps dads through divorce with legal education, free or reduced cost coaching, and mental health resources. If you own a business or know someone who does, there's an easy way to help by connecting credit card processing through our partner program. Part of the fees go straight to the foundation with no added cost to the business, and 98% of businesses are actually able to save money on their processing fees. It's a win-win. So if you know a business that accepts credit cards, get them in touch with me by sending a warm introduction email to jude@thedivorcedadvocate.com, or give me a call directly at 720-255-1021.
Yeah, I'm going to say, in terms of the career change, I think that's probably not something to all
That's
of a
probably
sudden,
true.
right? That's like the radical, I'm going to give up my career and I'm going to,
or quitting your job.
right, or quitting your job. Don't do those things. They don't really work. They really don't work, and they don't really impress anybody. They're not a long-term plan.
Right.
But on the other hand, coming home at 6:00 one night, and if you have to work the other night till 11, then that's what you do, right? Or give up some of the recreational things that maybe you liked doing, but you can't do anymore because you got to balance the work and taking care of your kids.
Right. And just know that this is going to happen anyway. So whether you do it now, which is going to benefit you, and this is an opportunity for it to be a smoother transition with the children by doing it now, as opposed to waiting to after and having it be just really incredibly difficult and strenuous, and then having to figure it out, maybe not liking the situation that you're in, and then having it be a financial burden because you didn't do it ahead of time, because you don't have time and you have more financial responsibility because of that, then it's going to change. So do something about it.
And I also think, look, I know that everybody is into these 50-50 schedules, right? And I think that one of the things that people have to understand is it's about meaningful time with your children, right? It's your children are not going to, when they're 30 years old, okay, think about, well, did I have equal hours with each parent? They're going to think about the experiences that they had with each parent. And, was my dad interested in what I was doing? Did he come to my lacrosse games? Did he, was he nice to my mom? Was he kind to her? All of those kinds of things are going to be things that your children are going to look back on. Was he at my birthday parties? Was he supportive at my school play? All of those things are important. Did he hang out with me on the weekends? Did we go to breakfast together? Or, or did we take a great trip together? Did we go skiing together? These are things that I think children remember more than, they're not going to count the hours.
Right. Well, let's talk about that too from the legal perspective, because there is this movement to starts to have statutes that start from 50-50 in the court process, parenting time, and then unless one party or the other demonstrates that there's a reason why that shouldn't happen, that is just automatic. So from your perspective and what you see, and I know that you're limited kind of to your area, but what are your feelings around that and that philosophy, and where do you think we're going to be going from there?
So look, I don't think that that's necessarily what our courts are doing. I think that our courts look at the best interests of the children and try to understand what has been the status quo and over time how that could change. And also they give a lot of deference to what the children themselves are saying and what the children want. As the children get older and are, for example, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, they're going to get a voice. They may not have a vote, as some judges say, but they do have a voice. And so what they're going to want also will make a difference. So I don't really believe that this automatic 50-50, as if we're like, just, as they said, cutting the children in half, is necessarily the way to go. I think that you have to look at what are the children used to doing, who do the children rely upon, who are they going to call when there's an urgent situation, or they've been bullied in school, or they got they broke their elbow, or whatever it is, right? And who do they look to on an ongoing basis to help them? I think that that's what courts will look at for the most part. And so I don't think that this automatic 50-50 is really, I don't think that that's really the direction that I'm seeing that the court goes. I do think that it's happening because there are more and more women obviously out in the workforce. I think that's the reason that it's happening. And as more women are working and everybody's working full time, then maybe it's getting changed up because both parents are outside the home and working. And why shouldn't it be at that point a 50-50 schedule? That's really the question, right? And I think in those cases where you have a nanny and you could share the nanny and the nanny goes back and forth, then yeah, that would seem to make sense, right? Because maybe both of you are like kissing the children goodbye in the morning and going off to work and then coming home at the end of the day, and one of you is cooking dinner one night and one of you is doing something else, while you're cooking dinner. What that lends itself to that type of situation.
Right. So I am very torn on this because I see and I understand the argument that is, yeah, it might be more beneficial to have one, more time with one parent or another. And just this whole philosophy of, like you said, cut down the middle and half is not necessarily the healthiest thing. But I also do see oftentimes and hear oftentimes, that the dads are not getting a fair opportunity at even demonstrating the opportunity to have that 50-50 time, particularly if they want to. And that it's almost that the default mindset is that, well, they should be with the mom the majority of the time. And that, this is just kind of the way that it should be. And so I get dads all the time and work with dads all across the country. So, in different parts of the country, it's different, but it seems that a general mindset is that it is the moms that have the preferential opportunity at the parenting time. And so that's where I struggle. And I know get a lot of questions. So in thinking about it, I think, oh, well, maybe it is good to have these kind of standards. And again, this is really hard, right? In court, because you're in court, you're with a judge or a magistrate that gets to see you for an hour or two, or maybe if you're lucky, a day or two, if it's very complex. They don't know much about, in detail about you. So working from that seems like from that 50-50 could be good, but then you start putting these 50-50 standards or statutes in order or in place, and it makes it, very rigid. So it's kind of a touchy, difficult situation.
That's what is concerning is the rigidity of it, right? And that there may be dads, for example, who are stay-at-home dads. And are those dads then going to automatically be a 50-50 schedule. Okay. And I hear you that sometimes dads feel that they are that there's a bias in the court system. I don't really see it, to be honest with you. A lot of the dads that I represent end up with 50-50 time or even primary custody. So I don't necessarily see it. I think it really depends upon the parenting, okay? And it depends upon the children. And I think that the courts look at it, and we have some really great judges out there. I think that they look at it closely and they listen to the facts of the case. And yeah, I mean, if they're seeing the people for an hour, but frankly, when you're going through a divorce, it's not usually that you're seeing them for an hour. You are getting to know this family. You're going to have some motion practice. They may come in for conferences. They're starting to get, and they may have an attorney for the children, who is speaking to the children, who is advocating for what the children want. I think that the courts do as good a job as they can under the circumstances of having a lot of people coming through the court system and the backlog due to COVID, of course, et cetera. But I think that you need to look really at the family and what the family unit is all about. And I think just making these hard and fast rules, I just don't see it. I think it's not that simple. We're not dividing up a pizza. Yeah. We're dividing up children.
Right. Yeah, it's most definitely a complex, difficult question. And I don't know that there's a tried and true answer to that. In a perfect world, it would be where they'd really know and understand the family, and there'd be able to analyze it and find the best case scenario, and but it's just not how the system is structured, and it would be virtually impossible to structure it that way. So yeah, it's very challenging. But on that note, then let's talk about kind of a sensitive part of that, where there might be one or the other parent that is alienating in an attempt to be able to manipulate that parenting time, and what can be done on that. Like, when you start to see, or you start to feel, and you mentioned it, like one of the parents that is bad, you talked about bad mouthing or doing something in an effort to start, like, whatever it might be. And we're not going to get into psychology of it, right? But doing whatever they're doing that is not healthy for the kids, that could be deemed as alienation. What steps do you need to start to take in order to mitigate? To hear the rest of this episode and access the corresponding resources, visit thedivorcedadvocate.com and become a member of our community. It's free to join and will provide you with the resources you deserve as a divorced or divorcing dad. Thank you for listening. God bless, and I'll talk with you next week.